Okay, I hope the weather's good where you are because it's not where I am. The phone number is 877 Eric, 877-973-7425. Should you like to join the program? We begin with news that some of you won't care about, but I got to acknowledge I do. I've always been fascinated by the British monarchy, by Queen Elizabeth and her husband. And Prince Philip, the world woke up to the news that he is dead at 99. It's sad in the sense that the Queen has lost her husband, the longest serving consort to a British royalty ever, male or female. And they were married for quite a long time, and more than 70 years. My goodness gracious! So when Queen Victoria was married to her husband, Prince Albert, when they moved into Windsor Castle, discovered that every night a dinner was still being served to King George II, who was several kings prior to her and long since dead. That's right. They continue to serve dinner to King George II, even though he was long since dead, because the order to serve the king had never gone away. And so the Queen, Victoria, had to rescind the order to stop serving dinner to the king who was not showing up to dinner because he was dead. 80 years after Queen Victoria died, the Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip move into Buckingham Palace. And every night when the Queen went to bed, there was a bottle of scotch next to her bed. And the Queen of England does not drink scotch. And it was Prince Philip who discovered that once Queen Victoria had had a cold when she was queen and had asked for a glass of scotch before bedtime. And 80 years later, every night they were still bringing a bottle of scotch to the bedside table of the sovereign because no one had ever rescinded the order. That's the sort of world we're living in. They live in, not us. It's this weird world. Long before the Kardashians, we had the dysfunctional British royal family, and yet I find them endearing and always have, particularly Prince Philip. He was a World War II naval officer. He was from the Greek royal family and had to renounce it in order to marry into the British royal family, and was the only man in England, he once complained, who couldn't give his children his last name. He served loyally and ably beside the Queen. The Crown, the TV show, has invented scandal along the way that wasn't necessarily true. Nonetheless, they had an endearing, lasting marriage and are now separated by eternity for now. So prayers for the Queen of England and her family, losing the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip. A fascinating individual in and of himself. His family, his mother was a princess of Greece. His grandfather was the crown prince of Greece, I do believe, or king of Greece. Yes, a minor member of the Greek royal family. He had to renounce his claim to the Greek throne, and then had to be tied to the Mountbatten family. And his mother wound up going insane, was for some time in an insane asylum, ultimately became a nun, and actually helped when the when the Greek regime military coup came about. She helped rescue people, and herself was given safe haven at the end of her life in Buckingham Palace. Princess Alice, her name was. Okay, we can move on. Yes, fifth child of Prince Andrew of Greece and Prince Alice, the daughter of Prince Louis of Battenberg. There we go. I'm fascinated by the whole thing. It's all part of history. I like history. Now, we should move on. The President of the United States. If you are black in this country, if you're black, you should be concerned with a statement uttered by Joe Biden, President of the United States. No amendment to the Constitution is absolute. said Joe Biden, President of the United States. The 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution bans slavery. If you're a black American, maybe you should give some pause to Joe Biden saying that no amendment to the Constitution is absolute. Of course, Joe Biden was not talking about the 13th Amendment. He was talking about the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution, the right to keep and bear arms.
Nothing I'm about to recommend in any way impinges on the Second Amendment. They're phony arguments suggesting that these are Second Amendment rights at stake from what we're talking about. But no amendment to the Constitution is absolute. You can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater. We call it freedom of speech. From the very beginning, you couldn't own any weapon you wanted to own. From the very beginning the Second Amendment existed, certain people weren't allowed to have weapons. So the idea is just bizarre to suggest that some of the things we're recommending are contrary to the Constitution. Gun violence in this country is an epidemic.
Except you're not actually doing anything to stop that epidemic. Let's just be real frank here. The epidemic of gun violence in this country overwhelmingly has to do with handguns and gang violence, and Joe Biden is doing nothing to deal with any of those problems. As I mentioned yesterday, the Justice Department will propose a rule to curb so-called ghost guns, guns that are assembled at home through kits or 3D printers. There'll be a yearly report on firearms trafficking. They'll do a model red flag law. And he wants to nominate David Chipman to head the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. He was a SWAT agent with the Bureau. He's a massive gun control zealot. He claimed last year that members of the Branch Davidian cult in Waco, Texas, which he was involved in that on the ATF side apparently, that they shot down helicopters, which they had fired at helicopters. They did not shoot them down, yet he claimed they had. His nomination, there's questions as to whether or not Joe Manchin would even support his nomination in the Senate. But Biden wants a gun control zealot in charge. He wants to do these regulations. But you know what? The big issue here is gun control, as Americans are worried about, is probably not going to happen. Philip Wegman at Real Clear Politics has this. The White House Rose Garden was an idyllic setting on Thursday, incongruously so, given the brutal problem being addressed. There, President Biden announced a slate of executive actions to combat what he called an epidemic of gun violence. Biden ran as a gun control candidate, someone with a record of both successes and failures on the issue. As a senator, he helped pass the Brady Handgun Violence Protection Act in 1993 and the assault weapons ban in 1994. He could not get more comprehensive checks into law as vice president. His message now as president is that he's willing to work with Congress, but he's also moving forward on his own. Flanked by Kamala Harris and Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, he announced half a dozen actions. He'll tighten regulations on ghost guns, firearms assembled by hobbyists from parts, often lacking serial numbers, require that buyers go through a background check to get them. He's called on the Justice Department to propose a rule that could outlaw pistol brace devices, specialty slings that replace standard stocks, like the one used last month in Boulder, Colorado. Biden ordered the Department of Justice to issue an annual report on firearms trafficking and to draft legislative templates for states to follow in passing red flag laws that would allow family members or law enforcement to remove firearms from anyone a court determined to be at risk. He also announced David Chipman of ATF, gun control activist, to be on there, but Republicans remain resolute in their opposition. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy promised as much before Biden even began his speech, tweeting the GOP will strongly oppose and pursue every option, be it legislative or judicial, to protect the right to keep and bear arms. Another thing that happened before the Rose Garden speech, an op-ed in the Washington Post, Joe Manchin wrote, the filibuster is a critical tool in protecting our democratic form of government. The West Virginia Democrat added, that's why I've said it before, we'll say it again to remove any shred of doubt. There's no circumstance in which I'll vote to eliminate or weaken the filibuster. He wasn't talking about guns per se, but it certainly kills the idea of being able to get anything through. With only 50 votes in the chamber, 51 if Harris casts a tie-breaking vote, the Democrats must rely on Republicans who are recalcitrant. Commercial firearm sales require background checks already, whether they're at a gun show or not. even though Joe Biden says they don't. Yet again, he put forward this lie.
Most people don't know. You walk into a store and you buy a gun, you have a background check. But you go to a gun show, you can buy whatever you want and no background check.
Wrong. Now I realize Democrats believe this, but Democrats also believe a magazine is a clip. Steve Gutowski at the Washington Free Beacon, he's been on the program several times talking about this stuff. President Joe Biden made numerous false and misleading statements while unveiling a package of gun control actions on Thursday. Biden falsely described how federal firearm laws work as he called Congress to amend those laws. Most people don't know. You walk into a store, you buy a gun, you get a background check, but you go to a gun show, you can buy whatever you want, no background check. Most people do not know what the president said because it is not true. Federal law does not regulate gun sales based on where they occur. Instead, it regulates them based on who is involved in the sale. If a licensed gun dealer is selling a gun to a private citizen, the sale must go through a background check. Licensed dealers can and do sell guns at gun shows. When a private citizen sells his own firearms to another private citizen inside their own state, federal law does not require a background check. Private citizens do often sell guns at gun shows, but such sales can be conducted anywhere else as well. Some states go beyond federal law and require all gun sales or even transfers between citizens to go through a licensed dealer, as H.R. 8 would require. That's the president's proposed gun legislation in Congress that can't go anywhere. Biden also falsely claimed the gun industry is uniquely protected from all liability while advocating for the repeal of the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Acts. People don't realize the only industry in America is a billion-dollar industry that can't be sued. They are exempt from being sued, or gun manufacturers. That claim is false. Gun manufacturers can be sued and sometimes are sued over claims of negligence. Remington settled a lawsuit over an alleged design flaw with the trigger of its popular Model 700 rifle. Sig Sauer has been sued multiple times over alleged safety defects in its P320 handgun. The Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act, which Biden wants to repeal, provides immunity to the industry over lawsuits stemming from criminal misuse of guns by third parties. Even the limited immunity granted to the gun industry is not unique. Numerous other industries have those protections. Pharmaceutical companies developing COVID-19 vaccines have immunity over lawsuits. The same immunity extends to employers who require vaccines for employment. Biden called on the Senate to pass gun control legislation that has been approved in the House. He argued on behalf of H.R. 1446, which would extend the amount of time the FBI can delay a gun sale with more misleading information. He said the existing 3-day limit for conducting a background check allowed Dylan Roof to carry out the 2015 Charleston shooting. While the shooter in Charleston did get his gun after a 3-day delay, extending the delay period would not have changed the outcome of the case. The shooting happened 2 months after the purchase, and the FBI did not find the records that should have prohibited him from buying a gun. So lies. That's basically Biden's plan to get gun control passed. And you know what? Even, believe it or not, PolitiFact, the left-wing hacks at PolitiFact, even they could not twist Biden's words to truth. PolitiFact always tries to, well, it was mostly true because he used proper grammar. Nope, they couldn't even do that. PolitiFact has had to say that Biden wasn't exactly truthful with his statements. Can you believe that? You can go to a gun show, you can buy whatever you want, and no background check. That's what they say. It is mostly false. Mostly false, according to even PolitiFact. Maybe the left will stop believing this one. If you go to a gun show and you buy a gun from a federally licensed seller, you have to pass a background check, just as you would at a brick and mortar store. While the data is incomplete, federally licensed sellers have been found to make up the substantial share, perhaps a majority, of gun show vendors. So lies, even PolitiFact, which is desperate to always defend the left, even they could not justify this Joe Biden claim. They couldn't do it.
No, I don't think it's a question of what is more urgent. I think it's just a question of how you do many things all at once. And today he's making these announcements today about these executive actions that he can take within his authority as president that are going to have a real impact on making sure that our communities are safer and that we're working to prevent these senseless gun deaths moving forward. So, he's somebody throughout his entire career in public service who has been incredibly focused on gun reform. He worked to pass the Brady bill when he was in the Senate. He worked to pass the assault weapons ban. This is something he feels incredibly powerfully about.
That was the White House communications director who can't explain how a man who has worked so passionately on guns for so long could get even the basic facts wrong. Why should we believe him on any of this when he can't even get the basic facts right, despite claiming he's worked on this stuff for so long? Doesn't matter. He can't get any of it through Congress.
You can follow Erick around social media.
Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, should you wish to be a part of the program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Remember the McCloskeys? Speaking of all the gun stuff, the McCloskeys were the couple in St. Louis when the, Black Lives Matter protesters stormed their gated neighborhood. They stood on their front lawn with guns to protect their property, afraid that the people who stormed the gated neighborhood could vandalize them. They were charged with unlawful use of a weapon and evidence tampering after pointing guns at the protesters who were walking by after the George Floyd riots. And the prosecutor in St. Louis, Kim Gardner, tried to prosecute them, first began harassing them for exercising their Second Amendment rights to protect their property. And Missouri Governor Mike Parsons said he would pardon the McCloskeys, were they even convicted. Gardner, of course, was one of the left-wing prosecutors. I believe that that Soros group that's funding radical leftists to be prosecutors had given her money. And so she does this, and, well, the Missouri Supreme Court, well, first of all, she was stripped of her ability due to conflicts of interest, given her statements about the McCloskeys, highly unprofessional. The Missouri Supreme Court stripped her of her powers. She has requested a review, and they have denied her ability to prosecute the St. Louis couple. The court didn't give an explanation for it, according to KSDK-TV, but it means that former U.S. Attorney Richard Callahan will be a special prosecutor to oversee the case. She was removed as prosecutor after after the McCloskeys' attorney argued she used the case for political gain. That's right. She fundraised. That's what it was. She made a big fundraiser over it. So a circuit judge in Missouri appointed Richard Callahan. Callahan had been the U.S. attorney for St. Louis from 2010 to 2017, had been a circuit judge, had been appointed by Barack Obama. So he's definitely a Democrat. And now they're out to get him. Now, here's the thing. The protesters were on their way to the home of the mayor of St. Louis. But the McCloskeys lived in a gated private neighborhood, and the protesters stormed the gates and decided to go through the private neighborhood. Given the vandalism and rioting that was happening and the looting, they decided to stand on the front lawn with their guns to protect their property. And again, I mean, the governor of Missouri's already said he's going to pardon them if they're found guilty. So it would the prosecutor, Kim Gardner, who's caused a crime wave in St. Louis through her own antics, has fundraised off the McCloskeys, and they threw her off the case. Just a ridiculous show of force. All right, when we come back, the Democratic Party, they're having some issues. It's Democrats sabotaging the Democrats' own agenda. They're spitting mad against Joe Manchin, as I told you yesterday. Although one left-wing columnist of the Washington Post, he's not really saying he's not going to change the filibuster. Just give him some time. They're in denial about this, but they got way more time on their hands. And also, the Democrats are they're uniting the GOP in ways people did not think was possible, including here in Georgia where I am. The polling for Brian Kemp suddenly through the roof with Republicans. Hello there. It is Erick Erickson. Glad to have you joining me today. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425 if you want to be a part of the program. The Democrats, they're the gift that keeps on giving for the Republicans. Kim Strassel in the Wall Street Journal has this piece. The media has reveled this year in the frequent gleeful pinning of obituaries for the Republican Party. Nothing has changed, by the way. The GOP is described as broken, fractured, befuddled about its identity, dying or already dead, not to mention up an unprintable creek after corporate donors cut money following the January 6th riot, or maybe not. The obits are hard to square with the surprising new number from House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy's political team, $27.1 million. That's the amount, they tell me, Mr. McCarthy single-handedly raked in during the first quarter of 2021. It's the most money any Republican representative has ever raised in a quarter. It's even more notable given it was accomplished mostly in 2 months. January was rough for Republicans, and it was done almost entirely without big business support. Only about $450,000 or less than 2% came from corporate political action committees. How big is a $27.1 million quarter? Mr. McCarthy raised over $100 million over the entire previous 2-year cycle, or an average of $12.5 million a quarter. The National Republican Congressional Committee announced Thursday it raked in $33.7 million in the first quarter, about $5 million of which came from Mr. McCarthy transferring the money. It pulled in $19.1 million in March alone, an odd-year fundraising record. The National Republican Senatorial Committee under Rick Scott had one of its healthiest Februarys ever, bringing in $6.4 million, despite a precipitous drop in corporate PAC donations. The numbers are even more striking because they shouldn't be. Republican voters remain demoralized over losing the presidency, and some are furious that more GOP lawmakers didn't dispute the results. The party has yet to figure out how it will manage Donald Trump and the potential for damaging clashes with the former president over recruitment, primaries, and issues. It remains high. The Democrat media complex is working hard to brand the party as racist, insurrectionist, and toxic for suburban or minority voters to support. And Democrats crushed Republicans in fundraising last year. Well, it turns out that the best thing for Republicans right now is the Democratic Party. The parties live in symbiotic rage against each other. They need each other. And the Democrats right now are helping the GOP. Nothing unites the Republicans like the Democrats trying to take away your rights. Lying, overreach, rallying the corporate woke hipsters, rallying the mob against the GOP. It tends to unite them. Look at Georgia. So last month, I saw internal Republican polling in Georgia that had Republicans bitterly divided about Brian Kemp. In fact, were the election held last month, Stacey Abrams would have beaten Brian Kemp, in large part because a significant minority of Republicans would have stayed home. There are still some who bellyache, but the polling in the last 2 weeks has rebounded for Kemp. If the election were held today in Georgia, Kemp would beat Abrams. Barely, but he would beat her. In fact, last month there was polling that showed Kemp, though he would make it out of a primary with pretty much anybody running against him, it would be close and divisive. In the last 2 weeks, the polling has shifted remarkably to the point that if Kemp were to have a primary, Kemp would defeat them all with room to spare. The GOP is coming home to Brian Kemp in Georgia. Republicans nationwide are turning their eye to Ron DeSantis in Florida. They see a guy who the media is attacking and putting upon, relentlessly, ruthlessly attacking him. He's starting to look like a 2024 contender to the GOP. By the way, 60 Minutes is now out with 4 separate statements trying to defend its reporting on Ron DeSantis and still ignoring the fact that it tried to claim there was a pay-to-play scandal between Ron DeSantis and Publix, the grocery store, when there wasn't. They've trashed Publix, they've trashed Ron DeSantis, and they can't defend it. They keep trying to deflect and dodge around it without ever having to get to the point of it. The American media and the Democrats live in a bubble. And in that bubble, Republicans are hyper divided, on the verge of a split, unable to focus and move forward, fixated on nonsensical issues like culture, unable to stop Joe Biden's agenda, and destined for the ash heap of history. And in their bubble, any data that suggests otherwise is dismissed as propaganda and untrue. And yet, Republicans are suddenly hitting fundraising records early, even without corporate donations. Republicans are united in blocking much of the progressive agenda in Washington, D.C. Republicans in places like Georgia are going back to Brian Kemp, rallying around him and the state as it comes under withering attack. Republicans nationwide are looking at Ron DeSantis. It's only a matter of time before Republicans start dropping opposition research on Ron DeSantis to try to stop his momentum in the run-up to 2024. Even the Democrats who fixated on Marco Rubio having a primary challenge from Ivanka Trump have been disheartened today. Donald Trump this morning released his endorsement for the Florida Senate race. He's endorsing Marco Rubio. Democrats thought maybe the Republicans could fight each other there and they would have a shot. Democrats are struggling in Florida. It looks like they're going to recruit Charlie Crist, the one-time Republican governor, the original Orange Man, to now run as the Democratic nominee for governor. Probably not going to be successful. Events change things, and the Democrats keep forgetting that. They were going to pass gun control. They were going to pass the Equality Act. They were going to pass H.R. 1. They were going to pass filibuster reform. Now they can't do any of that. Events change things. You've got Joe Manchin himself and other Democrats behind the scenes scuttling these things. You've got Joe Manchin coming forward and saying, hey, it's not just me. I'm the front man, but it's not just me. Now, it was obvious the whole time that Manchin wasn't going to scrap the filibuster, and you can see why. You can see why with his rejection of budget reconciliation as well. For the last several weeks, Joe Manchin has come out and said repeatedly that he wasn't going to change the filibuster, and yet the left has engaged in pressure campaign against him nonstop on a daily basis because Democratic members of the media said, well, maybe we just ask again. One more time. Ask Manchin one more time. Maybe if we ask really nice one more time, he'll do it. And so it's been a nonstop pressure campaign, him the one vote. And he finally had to come out and say, no, enough, stop this. Now imagine if Joe Manchin got rid of the filibuster, every single vote the Democrats put forward would involve pressure tactics on Joe Manchin. Gun legislation, the Equality Act, H.R. 1, Joe Biden's proposed education reforms that are coming down the pike. All of it, Joe Manchin, if you get rid of the filibuster, he wouldn't be able to get anything done for West Virginia. All he would be able to do is on a daily basis field calls from the media. Are you going to vote? Are you going to vote? Are you going to be it? Are you going to be it? What you going to do? He wouldn't be able to get anything done. So, of course, he doesn't want the filibuster. If the filibuster was gone, it would be nonstop every day against Joe Manchin. And now Justice Breyer is coming out and upending the Democrats' support of packing the court. Here's the New York Times. Justice Stephen G. Breyer warned on Tuesday expanding the size of the Supreme Court could erode public trust in it by sending the message that it is, at its core, a political institution. Justice Breyer, 82, is the oldest member of the court and the senior member of its three-member liberal wing. He made his comments in a long speech streamed to members of the Harvard Law School community. He did not address the possibility he might retire, giving Joe Biden a chance to name a new justice while the Senate is controlled by Democrats, but his talk had a valedictory quality. He explored the nature of the court's authority, saying it was undermined by labeling justices as conservative or liberal. Drawing a distinction between law and politics, he said not all splits on the court are predictable, and that those that are can generally be explained by differences in judicial philosophy or interpretive methods. Progressive groups and many Democrats were furious over Senate Republicans' failure to give a hearing in 2016 to Judge Merrick Garland, President Obama's third Supreme Court nominee. That anger was compounded by the rushed confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett. Liberals have pressed Mr. Biden to respond with what they say is corresponding hardball, expanding the number of seats on the court to overcome what is now a 6-3 conservative majority. Mr. Biden has been noncommittal but has created a commission to study possible changes to the structure of the court, including enlarging it and imposing term limits. Justice Breyer said it was a mistake to view the court as a political institution. He noted with seeming satisfaction that the court did not hear or decide cases that affected the political disagreements arising out of the 2020 election, and he listed 4 decisions: the Affordable Care Act, abortion, the census, and young immigrants, in which the court had disappointed conservatives. Those rulings were all decided by a 5-4 vote. In all of them, the majority included John Roberts and what was then the court's 4-member liberal wing to 4 majorities. I hope and expect the court will retain its authority, but that authority, like the rule of law, depends on trust, a trust that the court is guided by legal principles, not politics, Breyer said. Well, there goes Justice Breyer on this. By the way, Elena Kagan has also come out and said she's opposed to packing the court. And now Joe Manchin won't give up the filibuster. What are they going to do? All they can do is rage. All they can do is rage. And here's the thing, and again, let's assume, just for the sake of argument, let's assume that the 2020 election wasn't stolen. Just for the sake of, bear with me here, for the sake of argument, let's assume it wasn't stolen. What then explains Republicans winning everywhere and not the presidency if it wasn't stolen? The only way to reconcile that, if you assume it's not stolen, is Americans are tired of the rage machine. They were tired of President Trump's raging on Twitter. They were tired of Democrats raging in the streets across the country, burning down businesses. They're tired of the Democratic rage on everything. They're tired of the wokes coming into businesses and forcing people out and destroying people who aren't woke. They're tired of it. So when you have Justice Breyer say, nope, don't pack the court, when you have Elena Kagan saying, don't pack the court, when you have Joe Manchin saying, I'm not going to get rid of the filibuster, and by the way, we're not going to use reconciliation either, I'm not going to allow it to happen, he's going to block them, what do you think the Democrats are going to do? Their response is going to be more rage. And what do you think the American people are going to do? The American people are fed up with the day of rage. They're fed up with watching cities across America burn. Notice Portland, Oregon is still on fire, and the media has stopped covering it lest they anger Americans about what's happening. You hardly see any coverage. It's still going on in Portland, Oregon, and the media doesn't cover it. Why? Because if the American people were aware of the fact that it's still going on, they'd blame the Democrats even more because it's all a bunch of woke progressives doing it. By the way, did you see the Morning Consult poll? The Morning Consult does a left-leaning poll, and a plurality of voters support Georgia's election reform in it. That's right. More people support it than don't support it. They don't like the day of rage by the Democrats over that. The Major League Baseball. You know, Stacey Abrams in Georgia is having to do damage control now. And goes, no, I tried to talk about it not boycotting. I just said the players were going to boycott if they stayed and we were going to protest, but I didn't want them to boycott. I wanted it as a fundraising opportunity. Well, that's why they left. The baseball commissioner telling people in multiple media outlets he was afraid Stacey Abrams was going to politicize it so much, he had no choice. He had to leave. It's Stacey Abrams' fault. And she's in full damage control mode because she knows the voters are livid. The Democrats thought they had this in the bag, and the polling has shifted against them as people learn the facts. Even in American media, in lockstep against you learning the truth, can't stop you from learning the truth. And voters are getting mad at the Democrats over this. Events change things. And as the Democrats get even more enraged that they can't get anything done in Washington when they control it all, they're going to be even more enraged because that's what progressives do. When they don't get their way, they burn down America. And American voters see Joe Biden wanting to take away their guns to stop them from stopping progressives from destroying their homes and their businesses and their livelihood. What's to handcuff the police so the police can't protect Americans? The American people will respond at the polls. Trust the American people on this. They are you, and you are pissed at the Democrats and the progressives, and you're going to go vote in an election next year and punish the Democrats for their nonstop rage fest that gets nothing done except wipe out small businesses, livelihoods, and keep schools closed down.
He doesn't just have a radio show. Eric.
Welcome back. It is Erick Erickson. It is the greatest Friday on the calendar each year, Masters Friday. Did y'all see this shot? This happened. Oh, are they giving commentary on this one? Nope. They ran it without sound. That's Rory McIlroy. He's on the number 7 hole at the Masters. He's in the rough. He's trying to get out from some trees. He takes a hit at the ball, and the ball goes sailing across. And who, of all people, should the ball hit? Yes, the ball hit someone. It hit Rory McIlroy's dad. You couldn't have planned this. The ball. The ball. I mean, he can't see his dad from where he is, given the way the shot was, given the way the hit was, and couldn't see that it was his dad, but the ball managed to hit his dad. Right now, it is Justin Rose in the lead at the Masters. So the Wokes are upset at Augusta National. They're upset that the Masters are not being played elsewhere. Now, think about this for a minute. So, where is the Masters played? The Masters is played at Augusta National. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are, what you do, anywhere in the world, the Masters are played at Augusta National. Now, contrary to what Keith Olbermann and the Wokes think, it has nothing to do with slavery. They actually, so realtors are now being dissuaded from talking about the master bedroom. because supposedly it's racist now. It's racist to talk about the master bedroom. And you're not allowed to talk about the masters anymore because it somehow it refers to slave owners, the masters. No, it doesn't. It's about the best of the best. But the wokes are mad because the masters will not dig up Augusta National and transplant it in some other state just to play the masters because everybody's got to boycott Georgia. ESPN is running hit jobs. What the hell happened to ESPN? I mean, ESPN literally runs a hit job on the Augusta National chairman outlining all of the Republicans he's given money to. They haven't done that to anybody else. And then you got the Major League Baseball stuff. At least the PGA itself is not being politicized. They're keeping all their events in Georgia. They're not going to boycott. Let's go to the phones. Cliff in Warner Robins, Georgia. You're next. Welcome.
Yes, I was wondering why Governor Kemp and them could not at least threaten a lawsuit, say, for $500 million against Major League Baseball. I'm sure in their contract would come into Atlanta there was some out clauses, but Georgia didn't do anything to wrong, as you say, in our voting laws. And I would do that unless they were willing to go on television, Fox and all the other networks and debate with someone like Newt Gingrich over the Georgia laws versus New York laws.
I have said that the Governor Kemp ought to do a roundtable with like the Major League Baseball commissioner, the CEO of Delta, Coke, and Home Depot, and let them ask him questions and highlight just how they do business in all these other places. Now, Cliff, to answer your question, though, the contract with Major League Baseball doesn't go with the government of Georgia. It goes to Liberty Media, and that they own the TP. They own the Braves. And so I'm sure, given the way I used to be a contracts attorney back in the day, and there were outs for sporting events for various reasons, they will probably privately behind the scenes have to pay money. But they're not obligated to Cobb County. They're not obligated to the hotels that lost business. They're not obligated to the restaurants. Their obligation is a contract with owners of the field. And so they will probably have to pay some money to them, but they're not otherwise obligated. And the way contract law works in Georgia, because you don't have a direct contract with them, you can't sue them for their business decision to go elsewhere. You may want to, I may want to, but we don't actually have that contract right. So there's nothing we can do other than shame them for doing it. I personally think we need counter programming. Bring in Donald Trump, bring in a big event, bring them to the TP on the same day, and get more ratings, get more eyeballs on TV for that event than whatever will happen with the All-Star game. I have no desire to watch that game out in Whitesville, Colorado, where they moved the game to employ a bunch of white people instead of the black and brown people in Cobb County. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The Erick Erickson Show. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. You know, of all of the pressing issues of the day, the biggest issue apparently in America today is fonts. Fonts, they're not woke enough. Get ready. This is according to CNN. Here's a thought experiment. Close your eyes and imagine the font you'd use to depict the word Chinese. There's a good chance you pictured letters made from the swingy wedge-shaped strokes you've seen on restaurant signs, menus, takeaway boxes, and kung fu movie posters. Chop suey fonts, as American historian Paul Shaw calls them, have been a typographical shortcut for Asianness for decades. Shaw traces the font's origins to the Cleveland Type Foundry, which obtained a patent for a calligraphy-style printing type later named Mandarin in 1883. It is perhaps no surprise that this Eastern-inspired lettering emerged in the late 19th century, an era when Orientalism coursed fervishly through the West. Mandarin, originally known as Chinese, is the granddaddy of chop suey fonts. Shaw wrote, "Neither the food nor the fonts bear any real relation to true Chinese cuisine or calligraphy, but this has never prevented the proliferation of chop suey lettering and its close identification with Chinese culture outside of China." Type designers in the West have since cooked up many of their own versions of chop suey. Variations on the font are commercially distributed as wonton, Peking, Buddha, ginkgo, jinjing, kanban, Shanghai, China doll, fantan, martial arts, rice bowl, tsunami, karate, chow fun, chu ching san, njl, ching chang, and chang chang. It's hard not to cringe at the Chinese stereotypes bundled up with each font package, especially when seen through the lens of today's heightened vigilance towards discrimination and systemic racism. Critics believe that changing chop suey typefaces is downright racist, particularly when deployed by non-Asian. Aha! There we go. That's it. Let me read you this sentence again. Critics believe that using chop suey typefaces is downright racist, particularly when deployed by non-Asian creators. So if you're Asian and you use wonton, Peking, Buddha, ginkgo, jingjing, kanban, Shanghai, China doll, fantan, martial arts, strike bowl, tsunami, karate, chow fun, chu ching, sen, njl, ching chang, and chang chang, it's okay for you. But the rest of us, no! Don't you go using that ching chang 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 font. No! White politicians, meanwhile, have been using chop suey fonts to stoke xenophobia for over a century. Gosh. Wow. Online grocer Fresh Direct, clothing brand Abercrombie & Fitch, and game developers behind Cyberpunk 2077 are among the many companies criticized for using culturally appropriative fonts in the last 2 decades. A spokesperson for Fresh Direct told CNN the company unequivocally denounces racism and discrimination and regrets using a controversial typeface on advertising and packaging for its stir-fry kits, adding that no one involved in the 2012 decision is still at the organization. They're in the re-education camps. A spokesperson for Abercrombie & Fitch, meanwhile, said in an email that T-shirts featuring caricatures and stereotypical fonts from 2002 were inexcusable 19 years ago when they were released. Oh my gosh. For an older generation of Asian Americans, spotting the faux brushstroke lettering can trigger past traumas. I think of words in anti-Asian or anti-Japanese signs, wrote Japanese-American journalist Gil Asakawa, who began his career during a wave of anti-Japanese sentiment in the 1980s. I see the font wonton, and I see these words. I can't help it. In my experience, the font's been associated too often with racism aimed at me. CNN helpfully displays all of these fonts, by the way. Here we are. My goodness. They're also after the Pad Thai font. Listen, I realize that a font can be used by people who have ill intent to connect to a culture. But you know what? So I live in Macon, Georgia. It is the middle of Georgia. And I've got a Chinese restaurant I go to that I eat at called the Mandarin Restaurant. Guess which font choice the Chinese people who work there choose to use to advertise and make known that they're a Chinese restaurant? Across the street from my house is a Chinese restaurant, Zhang's Walk. Guess the font choices. There's Ming's down the street. Guess the font choice. There's a brilliant restaurant that it has sadly closed because of the pandemic in Atlanta, Lee's Golden Buddha. Now, they've got 2 locations. My favorite location, they've closed because of the pandemic. I used to go and eat there by myself. It's wonderful food. Guess the font choice. So you want to connect people to Asian food, guess the font choices used by the business owners to immediately evoke an idea of Asianness. Somehow it's racist. Well, no, see, they're giving themselves in the CNN article an out. Well, it's not racist if they use it, but if you see the sign and say, oh, that must be a Chinese place, then you're a racist for thinking it. You know, some people want to create a response and connect to something. There is a reason that some of these places have levels of connection with their fonts. Like, for example, so here's a picture on the CNN website. San Francisco police officers pass an art installation called Hopes for Chinatown. And guess what? It has Chinese characters, and then it has English lettering next to the Chinese characters that evoke the same brushstrokes, which is where the fonts come from. Have you ever seen Chinese lettering? Or Urdu lettering? Or Thai lettering? The English fonts were designed to evoke the brushstrokes used by the original so that you could connect it. You can't read it. This reminds me of a story the other day. Oh, what was it? That if you can't pronounce an Asian last name, Charlie linked to it. I saw it on Twitter. That's where I got it from him. That if you can't pronounce a Chinese person's name, you're casually racist. That's right. You see a name, you've never seen the name before, and you can't pronounce it right, you're casually racist. Oh, where's this other story? Where's this ridiculousness? I had this. Yes. This is from Jennifer Ho. Oh! Is it? Can I call her last name Ho? Am I allowed to do that? Am I pronouncing it right? Because I mean, this woman is clearly hypersensitive. She's a professor of Asian American Studies at the University of Colorado. And this is her piece. White supremacy is the root of all race-related violence in the United States. Amid the disturbing rise in attacks on Asian Americans since March 2020 is a troubling category of these assaults. Black people are also attacking Asian Americans. White people are the main perpetrators of anti-Asian racism. But in February 2021, a black person pushed an elderly Asian man to the ground in San Francisco. The man later died of his injuries. In another video from New York City on March 29, 2021, a black person pushed and beat an Asian American woman on the sidewalk in front of the doorway while onlookers observed the attack, then closed their door to the woman. As the current president of the Association of Asian American Studies and as an ethnic studies and critical race studies professor who specializes in Asian American victimology, well, she says culture, but she's really a victimology professor, I wanted to address the climate of anti-Asian racism I was seeing at the start of the pandemic. So in April 2020, I created a PowerPoint slide about anti-Asian racism that my employer turned into a website. That led to approximately 50 interviews, workshops, talks, and panel presentations I've done on anti-Asian racism in the time of COVID. The point I've made through all these experiences is that anti-Asian racism is the same source as anti-black racism, white supremacy. So when a black person attacks an Asian person, the encounter is fueled perhaps by racism, but very specifically by white supremacy. White supremacy does not require a white person to perpetrate it. White supremacy is an ideology, a pattern of values and beliefs that are ingrained in nearly every system and institution in the United States. It is a belief that to be white is to be human and invested with inalienable universal rights, and that to be non-white means you're less than human, a disposable object for others to abuse and misuse. The dehumanization of Asian people by U.S. society is driven by white supremacy and not by any black person who may or may not hate Asians. I told you people this was going to happen. I told you so. Don't ever doubt me on this stuff. I told you a week ago. After the video came out of the black man shoving the Filipino woman to the ground in New York, it was only a matter of time before some woke idiot came out and said, well, white supremacy caused him to do it. And sure enough, here we go. White supremacy is the root of racism can be seen in the Latino man in Texas stabbing a Burmese man in March of 2020, claiming he did so because they were Chinese, bringing the coronavirus to the United States. Though the suspect may have had mental health problems, his belief that this family posed a threat is driven by white supremacist ideas. Oh my gosh. You can't win with these people. This is where critical theory rots the brain. See, what you got to understand here is that in critical theory, your privileges are ranked, and the people with the most privilege cause all the problems. So when a black man harasses an Asian woman, it can't be the black man's fault because he doesn't have privilege because he's a black man. It must be Whitey's fault. Whitey had to do it. Somewhere, Donald Trump has a brain scanner pointed at the guy saying, go knock her over. It's Donald Trump. Go knock her over. I, Donald Trump, compel you to knock her over. I mean, this is what they actually think. These are insane people. This is why, by the way, these people are never going to actually get the level of control that they want in society because they're nuts and they say this stuff and people laugh at them. And notice what they want to do is they want to take away from someone who's not white their own culpability. It's no longer the black man who pushed the Asian man in San Francisco down. It's no longer his fault. It's no longer the fault of the black man shoving the Filipino woman down. It's no longer the fault of the Hispanic man who was insane stabbing the Burmese man. It's all Whitey's fault. These people are insane. We should ridicule and laugh at their insanity. The fonts Asian restaurant owners use to advertise their Asian restaurants, they're racist. But it's not their fault. It's the white man's fault for creating the fonts so that people could visibly connect, oh, that's a Chinese restaurant and I want Chinese tonight. These people. Jennifer Ho is a professor of Asian American Studies at the University of Colorado at Boulder. Maybe she's just got a Rocky Mountain high.
You're listening to the Erick Erickson Show, the perfect blend of news, analysis.
Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, if y'all want to be a part of the program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Listen, it's not just the anti-Asian hate conducted by non-white people that is all white people's fault. The New York Times has a story today, a guide to neo-pronouns. Listen, I realize the world has lost its ever-living mind, but some of this is a bit too much. A personal pronoun is a form of speech that stands in for a person or group of people. She is having opinions online. They are fighting in the comments. And of course, as in the Prince song made famous by Sinead O'Connor, nothing compares to you. Non-binary pronouns as well, often the singular they and them, have become widespread. A 2019 Pew Research study found already that 1 in 5 Americans knew someone who used non-binary pronouns. It was probably their grandchild, and they thought that their grandchild was an idiot. And then there are the neo-pronouns. Get ready, folks. It's brave new world out there. A neopronoun can be a word created to serve as a pronoun without expressing gender like Z and Zer, Zod. A neopronoun can also be a so-called noun self-pronoun. Ooh, whoa! Came close. Noun self-pronoun in which a pre-existing word is drafted into use as a pronoun. Noun self-pronouns can refer to animals, so your pronoun can be bun self, kitten self. Others refer to fantasy characters, vamp and vamp self, prin and cess and princess self, a cesspool. What's the plural of a cess? A cesspool of idiots. Fey, fair, fey self. In itself. How prevalent are neopronouns? Not yet. Not very yet. We're doing our best in the New York Times. A recent survey of pronoun use among 40,000 of the Alphabet Gang young people by the Trevor Project, a nonprofit dedicated to preventing suicide among queer and trans youth, found that 1/4 of them used non-binary pronouns. Most said they used common pronouns like he, she, and they. Just 4% used Z and Zer, and fey and fair, often in combination with other pronouns. So is it for real? Yes, and around any leading-edge behavior online, trolling, hijinks, and bad faith collide indistinctly. For those unfamiliar with the culture surrounding neopronouns right now, it's likely impossible to distinguish between what's playful and what's deeply meaningful. Many neopronoun users are dead serious and are also part of online communities that are quick to react swiftly to offenses. Oh, yes, they are. These people are offended by everything. They are deeply versed in the style and mores of contemporary identity, politics conversations. Oh my goodness gracious. And now apparently, if you don't use their neopronoun, you're a bad person. I'm sorry. There's a rule of thumb that we all need to learn here. If someone in their biography and their signature line or anything puts their preferred pronouns, that person is not a serious pronoun or not a serious person. They're serious about their pronouns, but they're not a serious person. Don't take them seriously. We see this trend online. The dumbest people on social media tend to be the people who have their preferred pronouns in their biographies and their signatures. Good gracious. They are also, by the way, it's also a big red flag that they are the most likely to be offended by a life. They're the ones upset about Chinese character English fonts. Oh, my goodness. They will eventually turn on themselves. Why, hello there. I'm still kind of blown away by the wokes. They're that predictable. I mean, I told you people the day after that video came out of the man in New York City attacking that Filipino woman, shoving her down on the ground, stomping on her head and the like. I told y'all that it was absolutely the case that we were going to see the wokes come out and say it was white supremacy to blame. That critical theorists would absolutely come out and blame white people for the black man attacking. And sure enough, I mean, we're not a week removed from it, or how many days removed? I can't even remember what it was now. There's been so much news between then and now. And sure enough, we've got the Boulder, Colorado professor saying, yep, white supremacy is to blame. Now, on a serious note, and genuinely, this is a serious note. This Asian American victimology professor at the University of Colorado, Professor Ho, writes that it is white supremacy to blame for a black man in San Francisco attacking an Asian man. In fact, the objective federal government data shows that more black people attack Asian Americans than white people do. And in fact, there's a lot of data that suggests that the claims of anti-Asian violence are way overstated. But the left will have us believe that even though disproportionately it's young black men, in fact, attacking Asian people in this country, that it's still white supremacy's fault. And even if you and I laugh at it and think these people are insane, we should at least understand why they believe this and why they will say it even though it's not true. It comes back to the Marxist ideology of critical theory. Critical theory is Marxist derived, and critical theory explains the world in terms of power imbalances. And critical theorists, this Asian American professor in Boulder, Colorado, maybe she's high, but maybe not. What she is a critical theorist. Critical theorists believe in the power imbalances derived through Marxist ideology. So, if you are white, male, cisgender, that means you're a dude who thinks you're a dude, heterosexual, and Christian, those are the dominant forces in Western society, according to the critical theorists. And so if you're a white, male, cisgendered, heterosexual, Christian, and ableist, that is, you don't have any disabilities, then you are the unstoppable force and dominant. And therefore, you have no moral ability to talk about what ails society, because in their mind, even if you have a bad life, a hard life, your parents abused you, whatever, it doesn't matter, because you are of dominant class in society and therefore have no power. And in fact, it is your ability to hold on to power above everyone else that influences all the other groups. So because you are dominant in society, not only are you not allowed to speak to the moral problems of society and the failures of society, but you also cause all of those problems. So when a black man attacks an elderly Asian woman, because the black man and the elderly Asian woman are of classes less than you, the white person, it's actually your behaviors towards them that direct their power imbalances, want of power, and hate that caused the black man to attack the Asian woman. See, classes of people or individuals no longer have volition unless they're in the dominant class. Individuals in the lesser classes are of groups, and as oppressed groups from the dominant oppressor whitey, they themselves are incapable of oppressing other people. If you go to the southern border of Texas, I have friends who live down there, and they say that the race issues down there are not white versus black and white versus Hispanic, but black versus Hispanic and Hispanic versus black. That there are racial undercurrents down there outside of white people. Critical theorists view this as all white supremacy affecting both of those classes and their behavior, and that but for white supremacy, those people would all get along together. Now, this is all insane, and we should all recognize it's insane, but we should also be willing to recognize that this insanity has grabbed hold of the academic class in this country. And so when your kids go to a lot of academic institutions, they're getting this in the classroom. They're internalizing it. It's big in law school. So I went to Mercer University's law school, and a lot of the professors there have gone woke. In fact, there's one professor there who caused some controversy by reading something a while back that had the N-word in it. And there's a professor there who is the mother hen of the Black Lives Matter kids or whatnot, and has stirred up antagonism against this guy. He apologized. He was just reading a statement made by someone at the university. But there's no grace, there's no forgiveness in the critical theorists. And they've made this professor's life miserable. The other professors, of course, many of them have gone all in on critical theory, and we see this reflected at other campuses. At Emory University, the Emroids, they have been overridden with critical theory. You find it even in their School of Theology. Everything is viewed through this critical theorist lens, where it is the whitey infects everyone else, and their behaviors are because of the infection of whiteness. And it's ironic here because there are legitimate concerns about China in this country. There are legitimate concerns about the Chinese having allowed COVID-19 to be released on the world through accident or otherwise through this facility in Wuhan, China. There's actually a lot of data to suggest it was lab released. There's a lot of data to suggest the World Health Organization covered it up. And there's a lot of data out there to suggest that a lot of Chinese immigrants to this country have ties to communist China and fear communist China. There's a lot of data to suggest that these Confucius institutes around the country that Donald Trump was shutting down and now Joe Biden is allowing to remain are actually propagating a lot of Chinese propaganda. And the Chinese and their sympathizers, the communists, use critical theory to say, well, if you complain about this stuff, it's white supremacy. And it's harder and harder to have honest conversations in the media about this stuff because so much of the media has been broken by critical theory. Critical theory believes in power imbalances, but here's the kicker with critical theory. If you're a critical theorist, what you can't admit is the truth of your theories, that if everything is about power imbalances and whoever has dominant power is oppressive, then at some point, if you're successful and you get dominant power, then you become the oppressor based on your own theory. Now, they believe that, well, no, once we get power, we won't behave like that, except we see this happening all over the place. We see, for example, them wanting to boycott Georgia for a minor election reform law. We see, for example, when you go to campuses, they have inquisitions against young white men who are accused of misconduct on campus who may or may not have been, and it creates star chambers to prosecute them and get away from due process standards. We see in society the wokes ransacking America, and they don't care about it. They don't care about their consequences, and they deny that it's violence. We see buildings burning down and people looting and ransacking places, and MSNBC anchor standing in front of the burning rubble saying it was mostly peaceful. They believe in changing words. They believe in changing phrases. They believe in coercion and re-education. So that's why an Asian American professor at the University of Colorado can, with a straight face, say that when a black person attacks an Asian person, it's still white supremacy, because she's internalized this critical theory nonsense that only white people can be oppressors. This is also where you get the idea that black people can't be racist, even though they can. You get it from this critical theory idea that because they're an oppressed class, oppressed classes cannot be haters, they can't be racist, they can't be bigoted. They believe this. Now, everyone knows in their daily life this isn't true. And so the reason that they have to silence you, the reason they believe you have to shut up and the reason they believe you and I aren't allowed to speak out about this stuff is because the only way they can win is through silence. And so you and I have an obligation to speak up. We have an obligation, if we can and feel safe doing it, in our diversity seminars to point out the nonsense. I remember it's kind of a thing now. Universities force kids, they come into college and you got to go through diversity workshops and stuff. I remember I loved in law school at Mercer our diversity workshop because, the administration, they took it so seriously. This is such a serious thing. And of course, they bring in these people, overpaid idiots, to come in and make you feel bad and oppressive if you're a white person. And we all had fun with it and outraged the diversity person. Of course, the administration, you're not taking it seriously. No, of course, none of us were taking it seriously. And that's part of the thing that these universities, they are so sincere in their belief that this nonsense is real stuff that they really do think you're going to take it seriously. And of course, you don't take it seriously. And to some degree, it breeds resentment that you're being forced to go through this stuff where they try to tell you you're a racist. And they actually make matters worse. Time heals all wounds. And the left is intent on continually picking scabs in this country so the wounds can never heal because they believe that they get power through these festering wounds. None of it makes sense. It's all a bunch of insanity. It's what you get on college campuses these days. And honest to goodness, I firmly believe one of the biggest ways to fight this is just to laugh at the nonsense. Laugh at the nonsense. Mock and ridicule them. Shame them by showing them being. Now, of course, their initial pushback is going to be aggressive and nasty. Their initial pushback is always to call you a racist or my favorite is the wokes telling you that you don't have a sense of humor. That's not funny. You can't pick on that person like hell. Of course we can. And you got to. You got to laugh at these people. Hey, you're not being a nice person. That's not what Jesus would do. I'm pretty sure you don't know what Jesus would do. Because, of course, I mean, the wokes don't like Jews either, and he was Jewish. So they just, these people, eventually, though, they turn on themselves. That's one reason why I just don't think that you and I should fret terribly about this. Yes, they're in a culturally dominant position right now. They are. We can't deny they're in a culturally dominant position. But as their rage fest goes on, because they think they control Washington now and they don't, as their rage fest goes on, they eventually turn on each other because they realize, wait a second, we control the House, we control the Senate, we control the White House, and we still can't get anything done. And they turn on each other. We are watching the beginnings of a bit of nastiness in this country. Yes, it is very much a cultural revolution. They want to subject all of us to it. But to a degree, they're going to be subjecting themselves to it, and it's going to end badly. We're already seeing a bunch of progressives who have for a long time agreed with the progressive agenda. They're starting to stand up. They're all getting on Substack, where it's harder to get rid of them, and they're writing about how ridiculous this stuff is. And it's former acolytes of the left pointing out that this stuff is bat poop crazy. The fact that we're already at this moment suggests that this isn't sustainable on the left. Now, again, I realize they're culturally dominant right now. We see their influence on corporate America. We see their influence on the media. But more and more Americans are starting to get a clue that this stuff just isn't right. It doesn't make any sense. And when you have people coming out and saying, well, the black guy who stomped the Filipino woman on the head and hurt her isn't culpable, it's the white guy who wasn't there, people start to get a clue real fast where this is heading. And more they realize that the wokes are the real racists.
Honest news and conservative views.
Never separate.
Hi there. I got a recommendation for you, and I need to take my own recommendation if I'm honest with you. I need to plug it in down here. The Eden Pure Thunderstorm. Listen, it is allergy season where I am. If it hasn't hit you yet, it is going to. The yellow clouds that float across, particularly from the stupid pine trees. The amount of times I've had to run my car through the car wash, I had to get a monthly pass. Well, I can't run my car through the Eden Pure. If I could, I would. Eden Pure is an air purifier. Not only does it take care of the pollen and the bacteria and the mold and the mildew, it takes care of the odors as well. If you got odors in your house, Eden Pure helps take care of it. Now, you can get a great deal on the Eden Pure Thunderstorm. It fits in the palm of your hand. It is a brilliant air purifier. And again, it's portable. You run it with a USB cord. You can run it right off the wall. What you do is you go to EdenPureDeals.com. Eden, like the Garden of Eden. EdenPureDeals.com. You get $10 off the lowest sale price. You use the code word Erick, E-R-I-C-K, at checkout. In fact, if you go to EdenPureDeals.com, you can see my name on the front page. Click me. Go through. You want the OxyLeaf 2 Thunderstorm Air Purifier, the Eden Pure Thunderstorm. It's a fancy big word to say OxyLeaf 2 Thunderstorm Air Purifier, so just the Eden Pure Thunderstorm. But here's the thing. It can generate ozone. It can kill the bacteria. It can kill the mold. It can get rid of the pollen. It can get rid of the odors. In fact, I did carry it downstairs the other day because my wife made fish in the oven, and I don't like the smell of fish. And it did way better than the essential oils getting rid of the smell. We won't go there, folks. All I'm saying is the Eden Pure did a way better bang-up job. So go to EdenPureDeals.com. Get $10 off the lowest sale price. Help your allergies. Help get rid of the stinky smells in your house. This is super problematic here. Ron DeSantis did a roundtable challenging the lockdown consensus. Using actual scientists, using actual science, and YouTube has removed it. This is from Chris Pandolfo at The Blaze. YouTube has removed a video of a public health roundtable hosted by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis with a panel of scientists and researchers who challenged the effectiveness of COVID-19 lockdowns and masks, claiming the discussion violated its community guidelines. The roundtable, which took place at the state capitol on March 18th and was streamed and posted to YouTube by WTSP-TV, featured former Trump White House coronavirus advisor Scott Atlas, epidemiologist Sunetra Gupta, and two researchers, both of whom were doctors. The scientists and researchers discussed how public policy measures adopted during the pandemic to mitigate spread of the virus, including quarantining healthy people, shutting businesses down, and mandating mask wearing, were inspired in part by fear rather than scientific evidence. They pointed to European data that suggests maybe the lockdowns weren't necessary, and to real-world data in this country that states that haven't had lockdowns are doing better than states that have. In fact, it turns out that in Michigan, one of the reasons they're saying there's one of the reasons for a massive surge in cases in Michigan is that the governor kept the state locked down so long that they weren't able to allow COVID to slowly spread through the population, younger people in particular, building up some level of natural immunity, and now they're all getting hit with it at once. And meanwhile, the mayor of Detroit has refused the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, putting parts of Michigan behind. The real-world data out there, though, is showing that we're doing a good job in this country, and globally, it is Great Britain and the United States and Israel that are doing way better than everyone else. Our 14-week average in this country is up 13%, and that's because of 4 U.S. states. Michigan, New Jersey, New York, and Rhode Island are accounting for the bulk of cases. Florida has been on the rise as well, in part because of spring breakers down in Miami area, but most of Florida is also in decline. It's the southern part of Florida in the Miami Beach area that saw an increase in cases, but they're not overwhelming hospitals there either. so much of the data has changed. And healthcare professionals in this country haven't wanted to be honest about where things are going. They haven't wanted to be honest about the direction of the data. Ron DeSantis, of course, is now filing a lawsuit against the CDC demanding cruise ships be allowed to be reopened.
Today, Florida's fighting back. We're filing a lawsuit against the federal government and the CDC demanding that our cruise ships be reopened immediately. This will be something that we believe we have every legal right to insist upon. We don't believe the federal government has the right to mothball a major industry for over a year based on very little evidence and very little data. And I think we have a good chance for success.
Here they go. They're going to fight. Ron DeSantis is right to fight this, and he's rapidly becoming the front runner in 2024 if President Trump doesn't run again. And there are signs emerging that he may not, which helps DeSantis. All right, when we come back, we got to talk about Andrew Cuomo. The media has become obsessed with Ron DeSantis in large part to avoid having to talk about Andrew Cuomo. The media is also obsessed with Stacey Abrams, and National Review has out a story how some of the Georgia reforms that supposedly repress and suppress voters, Stacey Abrams helped them draft the legislation. Oh, yes. And what did she do with Major League Baseball? There are new details emerging. We'll get into all that when we come back. Greetings, welcome. It is Friday. You can rejoice a little bit about that, I suppose, whether the weather's good where you are. It's not good where I am, although it's not raining yet. You know, can we have a moment here? Well, first, let me give you the phone number. You can call in 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Holy cow, I'm looking at the radar. South Georgia. Ugh. And headed my way. I've reached that point in dad mode where I've got my 15-year-old is really just a naturally gifted artist. And I don't say that lightly. I mean, she really is good. And my son he wants to play soccer, so he's playing soccer. And I want him to do something outside. He needs to move around. He's in front of a screen so much. And he likes soccer. He plays soccer. But can we just... It's not just me, I know, but I feel occasionally guilty where I'm thinking, is it going to rain so we don't have to go to the game? I mean, he loves to play. I like to watch him play. He appreciates me being there. But, you know, I've got friends who do travel ball for their kids. And everybody's convinced their kid's going to get some sort of athletic scholarship, and they're not. And travel ball, it just gets miserable. And everyone I know who does travel ball with their kids, the parents just seem privately miserable. And I work enough that I don't like to give up my weekend anyway. And to do something like travel ball, and then the ungodly nature of it, to do it on a Sunday. Hey, kids, let's teach you that there's something more important than God on Sunday. I'm glad my kid is playing. I really am. And now, you know, I'm done by 3. This is now with my work schedule doing 2 shows, 9 to noon and then noon to 3. And I'm done after 3 o'clock. And I still find myself wanting to stick around in the office because I'm convinced I need to do something, because I can't remember in my entire working life. I've never been done at the office before 6, for the longest time before 7. And now I'm done by 3. And what am I going to do? And now the kid is like, Dad, you could go get a golf membership and we go hit golf balls together. And I'm thinking that's not a bad idea once he's done with soccer, particularly this summer. Go get a golf cart. He can learn to drive a golf cart. Well, he can drive and be my designated driver, so I can day drink and hit golf balls. And I think we will probably be well balanced in doing that. But your kids grow up and you got to find new ways to entertain them and be active with them. All right, let's move on. Enough about that. The phone number again, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Man, the Andrew Cuomo scandals have gotten so egregious, the media more and more can't ignore them. Now, the New York Post is a longtime critic of Andrew Cuomo, so they've got enough stuff there to cover him. And it's amazing how most of the New York media isn't even covering the nursing home scandal. And the reason they're not, this is very important, I think, for everyone to understand. The New York media is covering Andrew Cuomo's sexual harassment scandal in ways they're not covering the nursing home scandal, in large part as a mea culpa. They were complicit in the nursing home scandal. They knew it was going on the entire time they were attacking Ron DeSantis, even though Ron DeSantis was making the right decisions to protect the elderly, and Andrew Cuomo didn't. They were ignoring Andrew Cuomo. CNN had him on CNN every night with his brother, verbal incest with his brother on CNN. And so the media now has to cover the scandal, the sex scandal, as a mea culpa. They can't admit that they didn't cover and still won't cover the nursing home scandal, but they got to do something. So they're giving coverage to his sexual harassment as a way to make up for not covering him killing a bunch of senior citizens, or to make up for him killing a bunch of senior citizens. Now, the New York Post is one of the few newspapers in New York that has called him out the whole time, and they're the only one running this story. Governor Andrew Cuomo's cover-up of nursing home COVID deaths was even worse than we thought. It turns out his Department of Health started collecting the key data a full year ago, even as it kept the information secret in defiance of lawmakers' rights, as well as freedom of information law. A Department of Health memo obtained by the New York Post shows the department began ordering care homes to report both in-home and in-hospital deaths of residents last April. Yet for 9 months, Team Cuomo refused to share it, with Health Commissioner Howard Zucker insulting legislators with bogus claims the info wasn't accurate enough to release, and other staffers falsely claiming they couldn't compile the information to comply with Freedom of Information law requests from the Empire Center. In January, Attorney General Tish James finally called out the clear signs that total deaths were half again what Team Cuomo was pretending, and only then did the Department of Health release the true tally. The conspiracy was all about hiding the evidence of a deadly scandal. Department of Health Commissioner Zucker's March 25, 2020 order forced homes to admit COVID-contagious patients without even testing them. That clearly led to needless deaths. Meanwhile, the governor's top people conspired to bully health professionals into pulling the truth from last July's Department of Health report that falsely claimed to prove the order was harmless. The media, the national media, particularly CNN, is culpable in this, but so too is the New York Times. CNN was praising Andrew Cuomo as a way to beat up Donald Trump. They needed Andrew Cuomo. He was useful to them at the time. He's no longer useful. They cannot go back and admit that they were willing idiots in covering for Cuomo. So now they've got to go after him for sexual harassment as a way to make it up. Here's the headline in the New York Times, another newspaper that covered for, apologized for, and defended Andrew Cuomo for his handling of killing old people. Headline, Cuomo aide says governor groomed her for months before groping. Subtitle, a woman who has accused Governor Andrew Cuomo of groping her in the executive mansion said she warned him, "You're going to get us in trouble." A woman who has accused Governor Andrew Cuomo of groping her in the executive mansion gave a fuller account in a published report on Wednesday, detailing how she believed the governor had groomed her for months with a series of tight hugs and sexually suggestive comments. She said in an interview with the Times-Union of Albany, New York, that Mr. Cuomo asked invasive questions about her personal life, recalling that at one point last year the governor told her, quote, "Oh, if you were single, the things that I would do to you," end quote. The groping incident followed later in 2020, said the woman, an administrative assistant who still works at the Capitol and who spoke on the condition of anonymity. In late November, she said the governor summoned her to his second-floor office at the executive mansion. The woman told the Times-Union that Mr. Cuomo closed the door and reached under her blouse. "He pulled me close, and all I remember is seeing his hand, his big hand," the woman said in the interview. Moments later, the governor grasped one of her breasts over her bra, leaving her so confused and so taken aback, she said. She told the Times-Union she had told the governor, "You're going to get us in trouble," because she didn't know what else to say. It was pretty much like, "What are you doing?" she said, adding, "He said, I don't care." Several current and former employees have lodged sexual harassment allegations against Mr. Cuomo in recent months, and other women have come forward with accounts of uncomfortable interactions with the governor. The alleged groping in the governor's mansion was the most sexually aggressive allegation, and it was forwarded to the state attorney general, Letitia James, who is overseeing an inquiry into the sexual harassment claims against the governor. In a text exchange with the New York Times on Wednesday, the woman confirmed the details that she told the Times-Union, as well as the fact that she had spoken to investigators deputized by Ms. James. She's one of several accusers who have been interviewed by the Attorney General's investigators, led by June H. Kim, a former acting U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, and Ann Clark, a well-regarded employment discrimination lawyer. A separate state assembly investigation is also underway, with a broader mandate, which also includes looking at the governor's handling of the state's nursing homes, where more than 15,000 people died during the pandemic. Both investigations are scheduled to take months to complete. Many of the state's Democratic leaders have now asked Mr. Cuomo to resign, with some of those calls following the groping allegations. The woman said that after the governor had groped her, she told him he was crazy, a comment she said seemed to hurt his ego. He turned around and walked back to his desk. He didn't say anything. I walked myself out to the front door, and nothing was said. It was almost like I felt like a piece of garbage to him. I felt degraded. Wow. Notice, however, that one paragraph from the New York Times. The state legislature is investigating him for his culpability in 15,000 deaths at nursing homes. 15,000 deaths at nursing homes. On the day that Andrew Cuomo's team ordered nursing home residents returned to nursing homes from hospitals without testing, Ron DeSantis in Florida, having reviewed the data, decided that it was best to shut down all nursing homes and bar any COVID patient from returning to a nursing home. In fact, he required that COVID positive nursing home residents be moved to different facilities until they tested negative, and then they could be returned. The media blasted and still blasts Ron DeSantis for supposed anti-science. They are attacking Ron DeSantis for not locking down the state of Florida. They are attacking Ron DeSantis. Remember in Jacksonville, earlier in the pandemic, you saw mass crowds at beaches, but they were using zoom lenses, the media was, so it looked like people were more compact on the beach than they actually were. They were more spread out. You would never know that from the media coverage. And the media was talking about the deaths at Jacksonville Beach. They were giving wall-to-wall coverage of the lawyer and Democratic activist who was dressing up as the Grim Reaper, who himself is now in legal trouble. They were interviewing him on CNN as if he was some sort of truthful activist. And things didn't go the media's way. Now, 60 Minutes engages in an ongoing character assassination of the governor of Florida and has released yet another statement trying to defend its 60 Minutes report that even outside media organizations are starting to say wasn't honest. And yet they do their best to not talk about Andrew Cuomo. They only talk about him now when local media in New York offers up something so salacious that they can't ignore it. A woman who claims she was groped, who says, now the New York Post says, there wasn't just a hug. He went for it, and I was kind of like, oh, the door is right there. This is, notice again the quotes that the New York Post chooses to use in its coverage of the exact same incident that the New York Times chose not to. Let me read you the New York Post coverage of the same thing. When she entered his second floor office, she said Cuomo came out from behind the desk and aggressively embraced her in what she described as an overt sexual manner that wasn't just a hug. He went for it, and I was kind of like, oh, the door's right there. The woman said she quietly freaked out. I didn't know what to say. It was pretty much like, what are you doing? That's when he slammed the door. He said, I don't care. Although the sound of the door was loud enough that Cuomo's staff most likely wondered what was going on, he wasn't deterred. He came right over. He pulled me close. And all I remember is seeing his hand, his big hand. I remember looking down like, holy beep. Cuomo, 63, reached under her blouse, grabbed her breast over her bra. I was so confused. I was taken aback. He never said anything, which was odd. That was the first blatant move. She said she also believed Cuomo tried to groom her. It was never in front of anybody. He made sure that it was either at the mansion or if it was at the Capitol, that no one was around. A co-worker, Allison McGrath, also told the New York Times late last month that the woman confided in her about the groping. They can't avoid covering the story. But just notice how quickly they moved on from the nursing home scandal. Notice how quickly they moved on from his helping Chris Cuomo, his brother. Notice how they moved on. Notice how they try to underplay and understate the facts about the nursing homes in all the major media outlets out there because they can never admit they used Andrew Cuomo as a way to get to Donald Trump. They used Andrew Cuomo as a way to embarrass Donald Trump. They used Andrew Cuomo to say, this guy's competent when he wasn't. And now they got to make up for it. But even in making up for it, they want to minimize some of the details because it makes them look bad because this is who he always was. The media knew it the whole time. And frankly, more we learn about the media, this is who the media is too. So they have a hard time covering it.
News and in-depth analysis from Erick Erickson.
You're wondering what to do this weekend. You're making plans. I can tell you one thing you should do is go to omahasteaks.com and get their Let's Go Grill package because it is perfect for the warmer weather. As people are getting the pollen off their grills and ready to fire them up. You get 4 butcher cut fillets. You get 4 boneless pork chops. You get 4 boneless chicken breasts. You get 4 kielbasa sausages. You get scalloped potatoes, caramel apple tartlets, their signature seasoning, and pay attention to this one. You get 12 Omaha Steak burgers, almost 4 pounds of hamburgers for free. For free. Now, how do you get this? Well, you go to omahasteaks.com and you put Georgia in the search bar. Up at the top of the site, there's a search bar. You know what? I do this. I'm still one of those old-fashioned people who likes to use my actual laptop as opposed to my phone. But, yep, if you go to the phone, look at this. It says we're experiencing unprecedented demand for all your gourmet favorites. Inventory quantities are limited, so don't delay. Order today. Well, you should. You'll see a little magnifying glass on the if you use your phone. Click the magnifying glass and put Georgia in. And when you do and you click search, you too will get the Let's Go Grill package. You're going to save over 45%. You're going to get 4 pounds of burgers for free. And they are great burgers. They're not your standard grocery store ground chuck. So go to omahasteaks.com today. Put Georgia in the search bar. You can thank me later. You can have your friends over. Life can go back to normal. Y'all, just done with the ad here. Life going back to normal. In Great Britain, the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip, the Queen's husband, for more than 70 years has died. And he wanted, I'm reading in the paper during commercial break, minimal fuss to begin with. He planned his funeral a decade ago when he was 89. He died at 99. He wanted minimal fuss. And now it's going to be less fuss because of COVID regulations. But Great Britain, the United Kingdom, is starting to come out from behind closed doors because Britain has been able to rally. So many people there got the virus to begin with. A lot of them have natural immunity, but tons and tons and tons of people in Great Britain now are getting the vaccine at a rapid clip, better than the rest of Europe. So many people, I mentioned this yesterday, so many people have been saying that that they thought that Britain would lag behind. They thought Britain would be worse off, that Britain would be terrible. But you know what? They're ahead of the rest of Europe. And so even though they've still got some COVID restrictions and the Duke of Edinburgh wanted minimal fuss, he will still get something. Now, he wanted no state funeral. So they won't get one, but it's still going to be a big deal over there, and they're going to be able to get this. They're going to be able to mourn him. Crowds have been lining up at Buckingham Palace, dropping off flowers, and at Windsor Castle as well, where he died. Crowds are dropping off lots of flowers. This is going to be something to behold. I mean, we haven't seen anything like this, I guess, since the Queen's mother died, who had Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. But I mean, this is kind of historic, whether you're into the royal family or not. 3 generations of British subjects and of the Commonwealth have had this guy as their queen's husband. His image has appeared on coins along with hers, and so it'll be a big deal for a lot of people. Not as big as the Queen. I've got a friend of mine who's from the UK, who's now an American citizen. And it is remarkable the amount of affection he has for the British royal family, particularly the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh. Absolutely remarkable. He gets emotional talking about him as if the Queen is his other mother. And he hadn't lived in the country in years, and yet he still gets remarkably emotional about it. What a connection to have a leader of your country who is not political. In this country, of course, we tried to model to a degree the presidency to some degree after the king with very limited powers, but combining the political and the national into one person. And it has largely worked. The presidents can still at sometimes lift people up who are partisans against them, but not like the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh can in Britain. This will be a remarkable event to watch. When we come back, Stacey Abrams. Oh, yes, we must talk about her. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here, the Erick Erickson Show, coast to coast now. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Next week, Matt Schaefer is going to join me. He's a Texas state representative. Georgia just had its fight over election laws, and now Texas is having its. And, of course, corporate America and the wokes are gearing up to protest and boycott Texas now. Fortune 500 companies coming out and harassing Texas. I want to spend a little time on that next week, and he is in the state house there where they are delving into this issue. Before I get into the Stacey Abrams stuff, the National Review is running. I want to play this for you, and let me set this up for you so you understand. And I realize some of you, it's not a big deal for you. You're listening. Why do we even care about this stuff? So when I was a kid, I grew up in Dubai. And in Dubai, if a member, to this day actually, if a member of the royal family died, radio and television was nothing but classical music for at least a week. Depending on the status of the royal, it could be 2 weeks. They would interrupt for news, and everyone would be dressed in black. And it was a remarkable thing that we don't get anything like this really in this country. When a president dies, the most recent was President George H.W. Bush passed away, and the media coverage of that lasted for about a week through the duration of his funeral. Lots of daily coverage. The day he died, I remember I was doing an event for Clark Howard, my friend from WSB Radio, up in Peachtree City, and the news broke as I was driving, and it went wall-to-wall coverage. And for multiple days on TV and radio, that was the coverage. That's the closest we get. We can't really understand what happens. And then with the British, all of the announcements come from the British Broadcasting Corporation. And no one knows, the press association and the like, you don't get word of this. It happens on the BBC. They interrupt, and they make the announcement, and then every other news channel can get it. And the Telegraph from London has put up the video of it happening live on the BBC. And you can just hear Martine Croxwell, the anchor. She gets super emotional. I want to play this for you, and then I got to tell you what happens in the video since you can't see it, because that's the other remarkable thing that happens with stuff like this.
You're watching BBC News. We have just received a statement from Buckingham Palace confirming that the Duke of Edinburgh has died. The statement says, "It is with deep sorrow that Her Majesty the Queen has announced the death of her beloved husband, His Royal Highness, the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. His Royal Highness passed away peacefully this morning at Windsor Castle." We have just received this information from Buckingham Palace. Let me repeat this news. "It is with deep sorrow that Her Majesty the Queen has announced the death of her beloved husband, His Royal Highness, the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. His Royal Highness passed away peacefully this morning at Windsor Castle."
You hear that little clap at the end. So they roll footage, B-roll footage of the Duke of Edinburgh there. And when the camera comes back to her, she's been wearing jewelry and this burgundy top. And when the footage then comes back to her, she's dressed all in black, and all of her jewelry is removed. And that's one of the things that the countries that have royalty tend to do, is that everyone dresses in black. So now if you were to watch the live stream news coverage now from Great Britain, from ITV or from Sky News or from the BBC, everybody is now in black. And the British royal family for 30 days will wear black. There will be official mourning for 8 days, according to Buckingham Palace today, but they'll all be in black for at least the next 30 days. Flags at half staff for 30 days. And for royalty, it's 6 months. For 6 months, they all wear black. And for if it was the head of state, it's just remarkable. I remember this as a kid. I remember waking up one morning and turning on it. And so growing up in Dubai, it's different now, but when I was a kid there, TV did not start until 4 p.m. It started at 3 p.m. on Saturdays, but literally television did not come on until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 o'clock on weekdays. And it started for 15 minutes. There was a call to prayer. And then there were kids' cartoon programming for about an hour or so. And then you would start into BBC documentaries, and then by 8 o'clock you had some American TV show, Magnum PI, Dallas, something. All the violence and sex was cut out, so your 40-minute American show would sometimes last 20 minutes. If it was Dallas and there was kissing, they'd cut it out, and that was it. You'd have a 20-minute show. And then you'd have a movie or something, 21 Jump Street, late night, something a little more grown up. It was all very funny. Occasionally you would get newscasts, and the newscaster would come on and say, "Good evening. There is no local news tonight. We'll get straight to weather." And so that's it. It's going to be hot. It'll be 99 degrees today and no rain. That's the news. They'd play some musical interlude of the BBC video of a train going through the countryside. But when someone died who was of note, you turn on the TV and there'd just be music. That's it. There'd be the person's picture with English and Arabic announcing the person had died and their life, and then there would just be music. And for a week, there'd be nothing. So you'd have to go to we used to have this thing called the movie store where you could go get videotapes and you could watch movies. Gosh, now my kids have no idea what this stuff is. What is a Blockbuster video? They have no idea. I had to explain it to my kid when I took him to see Captain Marvel when it's set in the 90s and she crash lands in a Blockbuster video. He's like, "What is this place?" I was like, "Oh my gosh, seriously?" All right, we can move on now. We got to get into these stories. National Review is doing really good work on this. Rich Lowry, the editor of National Review, has a piece out. The time Stacey Abrams suppressed the law. By the time the reader of Stacey Abrams' book, Our Time Is Now, gets to page 89, he is numb with the relentless contentions that any effort to make the Georgia election system more secure or economical, any bureaucratic mistake or inefficiency, is evidence of a dastardly scheme to suppress the vote. Then he is jolted alert again when Abrams writes how while in the state legislature in 2011, she co-sponsored legislation to slash the early voting period in Georgia in half and succeeded. By her own logic, Stacey Abrams suppressed the vote in Georgia and did it more blatantly than anything in the state's new voting law, which will actually extend early voting hours in many places. Anyone calling the Georgia law Jim Crow 2.0, at the very least, has his enumeration wrong. The Stacey Abrams supported bill in 2011 should, on these terms, give the 2.0 designation, rendering the new law Jim Crow 3.0. The Abrams legislation cut the days of early voting from 45 all the way down to 21. Why? Abrams said that early voting could be a cost-prohibitive burden to local governments. Similar jurisdictions, she writes, complained they'd have to cut back in other budget areas to maintain the longer period of early voting, and the costs of keeping a facility open were the same whether many people were using it or not. All undoubtedly true, but this didn't stop her and her allies from attributing the worst possible motives to localities that closed down polling places on the basis of exactly the same kind of reasoning. It didn't make fiscal sense for cash-strapped jurisdictions to continue to operate underutilized polling places. In her book, she portrays such decisions as a return to the bad old days enabled by the Supreme Court's Shelby decision that ended federal review of changes in the electoral system in Georgia and elsewhere. She herself collaborated in this. She herself collaborated in reducing the number of days of early voting in Georgia. And now she went up to New Jersey, which has 9 days of early voting, and claims that somehow New Jersey is more fair than Georgia. She claims that somehow that it's better there with 9 days. She's just making stuff up, if we're honest about it. She's making wild claims for attention. And the problem here, of course, is that Abrams, well, she knows all of this stuff. She knows that what she's saying isn't true. But she also knows the media is never going to hold her to the truth, because the media has a vested interest in helping the Democrats keep people incensed and enraged. Now, the Daily Signal at the Heritage Foundation has done what a lot of you have asked me to do, and I'm glad that they've done it. The Daily Signal, Fred Lucas, has written a comparison of Georgia's voting laws to the rest of the nation. Democrats have repeatedly denounced the new Georgia election integrity law that requires IDs for absentee ballots, but seldom criticizes the blue states that have comparable laws on the books, or in some cases, laws making it more difficult to vote than in Georgia. Overall, the Georgia law is pretty much in the mainstream and is not regressive or restrictive. Jason Sneed, executive director of Honest Elections Project, told the Daily Signal, the ability of absentee ballots and early voting is a lot more progressive than what's in blue states. It turns out the more people learn about Georgia's voting law, one, the more they like it. A Daily Signal poll, which is left-leaning, has a plurality of people support Georgia's law. But also now the Daily Signal at the Heritage Foundation has compared Georgia's law to blue state laws, and it turns out that a number of Democratic states, blue states, they've got more onerous, more burdensome election laws than Georgia. New York, for example, President Biden could just as easily has been referring to New York State's election law when he said, without specifying a state, that it's sick, citing as an example, deciding in some states that you can't bring water to people standing in line waiting to vote. New York prohibits providing meat, drink, tobacco, refreshment, or other provision with a retail value of more than $1 within 100 feet of the entrances to polling places. Montana is the only other state besides New York and Georgia that prohibits campaign workers from handing out drinks. Georgia's law now allows for 17 days of early voting. New York, by contrast, only allows 10 days of in-person voting. A New York Post editorial noted the Empire State fares poorly on making it easier to vote compared to Georgia, noting both more time to vote early and Georgia's no-excuse absentee voting. New York requires voters have an excuse to cast an absentee ballot. Biden called Georgia's voting system Jim Crow in the 21st century, but unlike Georgia, Biden's home state of Delaware has never allowed early in-person voting. The state will begin doing so in 2022. Even when Delaware does allow it, Georgia will still provide 7 more days of early voting than Delaware. Similar to Georgia, Delaware, under its law, will allow Saturday and Sunday voting. However, in Delaware, they will require that you be announced and your party be announced so people can challenge you at the polls. That's current Georgia or Delaware law. Delaware, the first state to ratify the U.S. Constitution, is among the last in the country to allow early voting. In Colorado, where Major League Baseball is going, Colorado's voting laws are more strict in some respects. It's not a clear-cut comparison because Colorado mails out ballots to all active voters, but voter service and polling centers must be open 15 days before an election. That's 2 fewer than Georgia. Moreover, Colorado's law states if you're voting by mail for the first time, you have to provide a photocopy of your identification when you return your mail-in ballot. The Georgia law will just require the absentee balloter to put their driver's license number or the last 4 digits of their social security number on the absentee ballot. To vote in Georgia, a person needs photo identification just as they do at the will call ticket window at Coors Field, wrote David Harsanyi at the National Review Analysis. In New Jersey, Stacey Abrams, the Democrat who lost the 2018 governor's race in Georgia, made a virtual appearance to celebrate the state's new early voting law, but New Jersey provides 9 fewer days of early voting than Georgia. In Rhode Island is more restrictive in some aspects. Rhode Island has a stricter deadline requiring absentee ballot requests to be submitted 21 days before Election Day. The 11-day deadline that Georgia requires puts Georgia on par with Texas, Arizona, Idaho, and Iowa. Florida has a 10-day rule. Indiana has a 12-day rule. Nebraska requires requests to be submitted by the 3rd Friday before the election. Missouri requires applications to be made 2 Wednesdays before the election. Rhode Island has one of the most burdensome with a 21-day requirement. On and on it goes. It turns out that Georgia's rules are right in line with a lot of Democratic states, or in some cases, way more progressive than Democratic states. Now, a lot of you have been asking for this information. If you text the word data to 33777, I'm going to send you back a link to this report at the Daily Signal so you can compare it or share it with your friends. All of your friends who think Georgia somehow has onerous, burdensome rules now in election, you can disabuse them of that by texting the word data to 33777. I'll send you back this link from the Heritage Foundation report of the Daily Signal showing that there are a whole bunch of Democratic states out there, with including Joe Biden's own home state, with way more burdensome rules than the state of Georgia. They'll be shocked and appalled to learn that Georgia is actually fairly progressive compared to the Democratic states.
Honest news and conservative views.
Never separated from the...
I just got a text from Philip. Philip, who does all the digital stuff for the Erick Erickson Show. He's not on the job. He just outed himself as at McDonald's instead of actually working. I may have to fire him again. But he went to McDonald's and he ordered a burger, and he said he just wanted bacon and cheese on the burger. They have literally given him a bun that has bacon and cheese between it and no burger. He should have gone to Omaha Steaks and he could have gotten 4 pounds of burgers for free to use. Literally, they gave him a bacon and cheese sandwich with no actual hamburger. Wow. You know, I did that the other day. So I used the app at McDonald's. I used the app at McDonald's to order a burger the other day. And I asked for extra ketchup and no pickles. I don't like pickles on my burger. Shut up. You're weird. I'm not. I don't like pickles on burger. I used the app, so it came across exactly as I wanted it. Extra ketchup and no pickles. They gave me no ketchup, extra mustard, and extra pickles. How do you screw this up? Is it any wonder that these companies are moving to kiosks and machines, and yet they're still screwing up the orders? I have no idea. At this point, I'm getting kind of paranoid. Do they know it's me and they're just screwing it up intentionally? It's like going to Chick-fil-A the other day, and some poor guy, he heard me talking about it on air, and he reached out. He was a good sport about it. He got my order and I got his order. I don't know how Chick-fil-A does it to begin with. We should probably put Chick-fil-A in charge. It's rare when they screw up an order. They screwed up ours the other day. I got that guy's sausage biscuit, and he got my bacon, egg, and cheese with extra bacon and no cheese. Of course, I got his sausage, egg, and cheese with no egg and cheese. I don't get it, but God bless the people at Chick-fil-A. They're still the best. How do you order a burger with just bacon and cheese on it, and they don't even give you the burger part of it? I don't know. But they did. Maybe someone has a sense of humor. All right. We got to move on to other stuff. Sony Pictures is exiting the streaming wars. So, everybody is coming up with their streaming packages. And Sony has given up. Sony has entered into a deal with Netflix, where Netflix will get its first run pictures first. So Starz Entertainment has been Sony's streaming service. I did not actually realize that. And everything's going to go to Netflix now. So Morbius, which is a Spider-Man offshoot with Jared Leto as a vampire, and Uncharted, a Tom Holland picture about a PlayStation game. Oh, that sounds like a real winner. They're going to go to Netflix first. Meanwhile, HBO Max is doing a pretty good job. I'll tell you who's not. NBC, Comcast, their Peacock service kind of sucks. I got a buddy of mine who is a huge WWE fan, loves wrestling, has the WWE package, and now they're making you use Peacock, and it's not even compatible with apparently some or most Samsung TVs. He's had a terrible experience having paid for the package to be able to watch wrestling, and now he can't. The Comcast people just seem to be inept when it comes to this. The Warner Brothers HBO Max service is pretty good. I gotta say, if you're looking for if you have HBO Max, I liked Godzilla versus King Kong. Now it is a movie that does exactly as the title says it is. Godzilla versus King Kong. The monsters are beating the crap out of each other within the first 15 minutes of the movie, and they do it for an hour and a half. It's well done in my mind. And I watched it with my son. There's some language, but I mean, it's monsters beating each other up. It's not that bad. It's something to watch this weekend. Or watch Ted Lasso. Get your Apple TV Plus subscription and watch Ted Lasso. It's still the greatest TV show out there right now in my mind. All right, when I come back on Monday, I'll have some news for you, but I can't talk to you about it right now.